All right, so again, today we're going to cover on the DRaaS solution. So I'm going to start at the high level. We're going to talk about how this is deployed and what it does. Then we're going to talk about some of the features and then cover down on booting options and how to recover. So with that being said, so this is the Infrascale Partner Dashboard. As you can see here, this is where you'll go in and go ahead and manage the dashboard, keep an eye on it. But real quick, the way you deploy this is we put a box on site. It looks at all of your data, physical and virtual, aggregates the data onto the box, and then from there it's able to pull in the data and dedupe it both job-based and then globally. Once that data has been globally deduped, it's going to create a global block map that it'll share with the cloud, where it'll then push that data over to the cloud repository, enabling you to pull out files and boot machines in our cloud. Now, speaking of pull out files, when you have the data backed up either locally or in the cloud, you can go up to a machine and actually open it up and pull out files. So we can demonstrate that by going to the Clients tab, down into Summary, and then I can go to any one of my machines and I can open it up by Browse and Restore. And then once that opens up the Restore package, I can then begin to browse different points of time, choose Contained Files, and then tell it to restore only selected items. Now it'll take just a second to prepare that for browsing, but then I'll browse a partition. And then from there, I can restore it back to the same machine or to any of the other machines listed in here. I can also browse the client on that specific machine and determine exactly where to deposit the data. So if I want to download a file directly, I just click the blue link, or I can check boxes, determine its location, and hit restore. Likewise, you can recover full-on virtual machines. Same idea, right-click and restore. Again, I'll have a snapshot to choose from any point in time, and then I'll just tell it to either create a brand new machine or restore over an existing one. Either is fine, depending on what your scenario is. Choose its host and its data store if you're doing a brand new machine. Name it, and then tell it to automatically power on and automatically configure the network when it's all said and done. And this way you'll be able to get that up and running in no time. You'll be able to run to lunch while this is rebuilding. So on top of being able to do this granular backup, we can actually do well, on top of being able to recover granularly, we can do granular backups. So if I go down into this machine and I click on Edit and I grab a machine, I have a myriad of different options for backup. So VMware and Hyper-V are host level, so we just point it to the host, no agent needed, and it snapshots everything. Alternatively, you can do a physical backup by pushing an agent to the guest, and then I can choose to do system state, live bare metal, SQL backup, Exchange database backup, mailbox backup, and file folder backup. Now on top of all that, the bare metal that I can do is both cold and hot. That is to say I can do hardware independent recovery for brand new machines, all the way into rolling back like a restore point with what we call a hot bare metal recovery. Now we also have another type of backup we could do is this disaster recovery image. This is especially exclusive to the Windows and Linux platforms. The idea is I can basically tell this machine to do not only a bare metal backup that's good for cold BMR and hot BMR, but I can also use this to virtualize the machine on our appliance or in the cloud on the fly. So if you have physical machines and virtual machines down, there's no reason why you can't spin up your entire site regardless of where it's at. So that's that extra image that we can do here. Top of that, you can determine how much to keep locally and how much to keep off-site. You could even choose whether or not you want to push a machine off-site at all. So we have this enable replication option so that maybe you have like a dev environment that you'd also like to back up but don't necessarily want to put it into the cloud. You can disable the replication feature. So we talked a little bit about SQL and Exchange. If you have something like Oracle or MySQL or some other database or other application that is going to be more touchy to be backed up, we can actually run before and after snapshot scripts here, where we'll look at a script on that guest machine, and then it'll run that before the backup occurs. So again, if it's Oracle database, for example, we'd run an RMAN script to tell it to quiesce the database and then resume the transaction, right? So that's kind of the idea behind that. So I can go up to the boot tab and then right-click a machine. I talked about booting. I can boot an entire group or individual machines. By simply clicking on the boot tab, I can scroll through and find out again the point in time I want to boot from and hit next. Set the resources that the appliance will use to boot the machine. Set the network settings. And note here I've got no network for VNC only access. I've got bridged on ETH 0, 1, or 2, or 3. And the idea is if you have different subnets you want it to route to or boot on. Or you could boot on an isolated private subnet. So essentially non-disruptive DR testing. Could boot all of my machines on this isolated private subnet. They'll see one another, but my live site doesn't know that they're running. So it's a good way to make sure that you're not breaking anything for your test. I just go ahead and click boot. I'll go to my active tab and lower the refresh rate down to 5 seconds instead of 30. And you can see here that I get a live preview of the machine as it comes up, but I can also click on the machine and then watch it come up from here. So I can use the VNC through the appliance here, or through the web browser, excuse me. Once I've got that started, I can log in. And then ping Google to make sure my network is up and running. So as you can see, we booted that machine fairly quickly. We guarantee 15 minutes or less on your machines so that we can get these up and running in no time at all. So you still have that ability to have essentially pretty hot failover. It's not high availability. You still require that intermediate step. You still have to hit the button. But other than that, it's actually going to be ready to go in just moments. So in the event that I have, for example, that a disaster where this physical machine has failed me and I need to rebuild it, I can boot this machine, and while it's running here, I'm just going to go over to my support tab, scroll down, have my new hardware assembled, and then boot into the recovery environment using this ISO. Once I've rebooted into this recovery environment, it's then going to enable me to choose the partition, what machine I'm rebuilding, and then be able to pull in that data. Now, once that baseline is built, that initial rebuild, I'll want to push back the new data. So again, with physical machines, I'll then power this machine off. I'll pull the plug for sake of time. But then I can click Create Backup Job. And once I click Create Backup Job, that's going to turn that data into a new backup version that I can restore from. So if I hit this and choose Yes, it truncates that and it appears in my job settings as a new job that I can right-click and just restore using that bare metal option or rolling back to the virtual machine environment, depending on what the need is. Now again, if it is a virtual machine environment, I don't need to use the recovery environment ISO. I can simply just convert it into a job and then push back the job to the respective hypervisor. Moving over to replication, Infrascale is very flexible as to where you send your data. We have our cloud. We have support with Google Cloud Services, AWS, Azure, even your own colo if you wanted to, right? So you can basically set up your own offsite center, your own data center, deploy another appliance there, and have that as the receiving end. So we can replicate from one appliance to another. Now, if I go to compression, you can see that we have both byte level delta and DDFS assisted. And DDFS assisted is actually one of our patented technologies. It's going to enable us to quickly get data back and forth from the cloud. So let's say that you do have a greater level disaster. It's more than just a single machine. The whole site is underwater and you have to rebuild from that. Well, we want to make sure that any recovering data is going to get back to your main site, or more importantly, back to a live production environment to restore to ASAP. And we'll talk more on this, and actually, I'll just do it now. The idea is we can actually remove redundant blocks and then push over only the unique data. So essentially, earlier I talked about that global block map that we create. What we do is we actually, in fact, there it goes. It just fired it off right now to the cloud. You see how fast that was? So I can see that my maximum rate is 121 megabits per second that this machine has access to. But if I were one of our competitors and I wanted to push the same job over in the same amount of time you just saw that flick over to it, your clients would need an 18.4 gigabit per second connection. Now that's our effective throughput of what we can do because of the amount of data we dedupe. And interestingly enough, that number is actually quite pathetic. We've got people that run gigabits per second, or excuse me, terabits per second, because of the amount of data they dedupe, the amount of jobs, the retention settings. So the more data you have, the more I have to sample from, the less I have to send. And by the way, that does work in reverse. So when we're recovering, this is how we're going to enable you to recover data from the cloud incredibly quickly. And this ensures that your recovery point objectives and your recovery time objectives are incredibly mitigated compared to what you would normally have to deal with. Of course, all that is over the ability to set the bandwidth management so you can slow things down if they're saturating your network, because our appliance will push as hard as it can. As you see, mine was, I've actually got it capped at about 120 megabits per second, and it used it, right? So it'll use what it can, so you'll want to be able to throttle that. But I should also mention that we also offer 256-bit encryption locally, in transit, and at rest. In fact, Infrascale is the only cloud provider in the world that offers CGIS compatible data centers. And that is to say, if you have any government agencies that have classified documentation where they need to have certain levels of security to be able to replicate it to that cloud, we've got you covered on that. In fact, don't take my word for it. Email us at team@infrascale.com or our support team at support@infrascale.com. Request the auditing. We'll send you an NDA that you'll need to sign and fill out. Once we know who you are and where you're at, we can actually send you the documentation on the security center credentialing. And this way you can keep that in your hot little hands. So I do want to go over to my cloud. So to do that, I can actually bring up another tab and go to my master dashboard, where I can log in and actively reach my cloud remotely. And this is important to know. I can reach all of my appliances. So if you're a reseller of this product and you need to quickly access all of your clients' appliances, you can go into the appliance section here and see them all stacked up. Now I've got a lot of dead ones here that I play with, but if I wanted to, I just connect it. I can assign it to different companies so that I can ensure that I'm only managing the one I need, and then I'll just click on my cloud. This will remotely access it from, again, anywhere in the world over a secure connection. Then I'll just run to my boot tab. And again, in the event of a complete disaster, I'm not going to relegate to a single boot or a boot group. I'm going to use our orchestration tool. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to be able to drag and drop machines or remove them, whatever your need is. Then I'm going to tell it to wait, build a group, set machines in the group, tell it to wait a little more, make another group, and set more machines in there. So essentially what I've done is I've created a hierarchy, top to bottom, left to right, what needs to boot. So number one, my domain controller needs to come up. It's also a DHCP server, so I did capture the MACs, so I'm going to be able to assign an IP address based off the MAC addressing, which we also capture IP addresses as well, by the way, so that I can make sure that these machines come up and they know who they are. They've got their identities when they come online. And I'm going to have it wait a second so that this machine comes up for share. Then I'm going to create a group of critical machines, and I'm going to say my SQL server comes up first, followed by my MySQL server, so that my application layer, when it comes online, already has the databases to draw from. And so I'll have that wait. Now, normally I'd probably just put a wait, or excuse me, not a wait timer, but a ping here, and have it ping for 1488 to make sure my SQL services are online. And then once I've confirmed, then I'll boot my application layer. I'll also have my LAN pre-configured so I can make sure that the gateway and the DHCP range are properly set up so that when they do boot online, whether I'm using DHCP or static IPs, it'll know who they are and know what their IP addresses are, get the machines speaking to one another, and get it all going. So I'm just going to hit run and go to my active tab. We can watch these come up. So I'm going to lower the refresh rate to, again, 5 seconds. So while we're waiting for these machines to come online, I did want to mention that there is some heterogeneity coming on in here. What I mean by that is we've got a demo server here that's my Active Directory server, which is a Windows 2008 R2 server, but it's running on VMware. I've also got my SQL server, also running 2008 R2, also in VMware. I've got my Linux Hyper-V machine, so this is my MySQL server running in Hyper-V. And I've also got a physical Linux machine and a physical Windows machine. So as you can see, my domain controller came up, booted, my SQL server came up, completed, told it to boot my Linux server and followed by my CentOS server and shortly afterwards my other 2008 R2 physical machine. I didn't have to do anything. I'm sitting here gabbing away while this brings everything up. And again, because I brought on, pre-configured my LAN, it knows what it's doing. It knows who it is. It's got its identity already. So all these machines will come up in the order that they're supposed to come up into. And in the event that, for example, everything goes down and I have a need to be able to recover after the fact, I can just simply power off the machine as before, convert it into a job as before. I would go over to my clients. In this instance, I would simply, my jobs. I'd right-click and I'd say push back the primary. And by the way, that other job that I created earlier, remember that one at the very beginning of this demo? It's already been uploaded to the cloud. that job I just created. It's considered a full backup. So as you can see, upload is quick. Recovery, just as fast. I just tell it to push back to primary, it's rebuilt, and I'm good to go. So again, replication on the other side, you can see how it goes. So with that being said, we're going to get on the home stretch here. So while I'm talking about the housekeeping here, I want to encourage you guys to, again, use the questions tool if you have any questions for me. I'd be happy to answer those at the end of this webinar. But again, this box is Linux based. We actually give you complete SSH access. If you need, you can go in there and install your SolarWinds agent or your LabTech agent or whatever they're calling themselves now that they've been bought by ConnectWise, or whatever RMM or whatever solution they're using to manage and monitor your hardware. But we can also manage it from our appliance itself. So we have the ability to send you alerts on hardware, on replication, on the licensing, and also on the jobs themselves. So you get everything from the daily jobs to the weekly jobs to the failures as soon as they occur to the media request on when you plug in a USB drive and jump to that. We also have lack of job reports, changes. So if somebody comes in and makes a change, it'll report you on that. And that report comes either via email or SNMP, depending on what you want to utilize, or really both if you want. And it has a built-in email server, so there's really nothing you need to do to be able to make sure that this reports back to you. Now, another thing I want to mention, I'm going to go back to my cloud and just take a step back here. I did want to mention that we do have direct ConnectWise integration with this product. So as errors occur, they're creating tickets in your ConnectWise system, or they're creating tickets in your other system, whatever you're using. And then because if you do have ConnectWise, we're able to auto close those tickets as they're resolved. So you just need to focus on checking out what the problem is. You find out what the problem is, you fix it, it'll automatically do a backup, and once the backup occurs, it'll fire off an all clear to your ticketing system and then purge that ticket, or at least clean up the ticket, consider it resolved. And of course, billing, so you can keep track of what the people owe you. All right, with that being said, I did want to just mention that we offer 24/7 stateside support with this product. Email, live chat, ticketing, phone support, all of the above is included and available. We want to go ahead and encourage you to utilize that if that ever happens. We also have this ability to get unlimited training on the product. We find that if we train people, there's less support work that our support team has to do, which translates into better SLAs, which is why we guarantee a 2-hour response on any product, right? Maximum 2-hour response. And I don't mean the thank you for calling Infrascale. We respect your time, and therefore, because it's important, we'll get back to you in 2 days. That doesn't mean that you're important to them. That just means that you're part of a number, and we're just going to queue you up. With Infrascale, we will give you a relevant answer. We will say, try this. We give you an action item within the 2-hour time limit so that you're on your way to repairing and fixing whatever's wrong. And again, we also offer besides unlimited training, unlimited updates. So anytime a new feature comes out, it's yours to have for free, no additional cost. And that's important because you shouldn't be penalized for purchasing something today and having an awesome new feature come out tomorrow. A good example of that is that we are fully fleshing out our failover services to be more automated in the future. I can't talk too much about that, but the idea is pretty soon it'll be completely automated on the failover and the checking. And so when that comes out, wouldn't that be awesome to have? Of course it would be, right? Because it's less work you have to do to get the same amount of job done. So now we're going to have that released, and it's free for you to have once it comes out. We also do all the hardware warranty as well. So if the piece of RAM, RAM module dies, or the CPU fries, or the motherboard goes bad, or the hard drive goes bad, I promise you a hard drive will go bad in the time for the that you have the box. We replace it as part of the service, no extra cost. In the event that you have total site failure and we have to send you a brand new box so you can recover too, that box is part of the service. So we run this as a service. This also includes, if you pick up our cloud, the ability to replicate not only to our cloud, but spin up in our cloud. And unlike our competitors, there is no time limit to how long you're running in our cloud. And more importantly, there is no queue that you have to wait into to boot these machines. You saw me come in here and just do this on the fly. You have that same power. We'll give you access to a dashboard that you can boot whenever you want, for whatever reason what you want, just because you feel like it. And again, there's no limit. Let's say you forgot to power it off after 2 weeks. Oops, not a big deal. Power it off when you get the chance. Or let's say that you do fail over because it really, you're in a tight spot. Well, we're going to check up on you every month to see how things are going. But, stuff happens. If you're waiting on the new hard drive to come in, or you didn't have the opportunity because 2 weekends ago was 4th of July. I got to spend some time with family. We get that, right? You gotta make sure that you are sane while you're recovering things. So we give you the time to do that, and we don't surprise you with extra hidden fees or charges or anything like that. Now, with that being said, I covered a lot of ground. I even touched some of the sales aspect of this. So what I'm going to do from here is open it up for any questions that anyone has. If you have any questions, please go ahead and use the questions tool. I'd be happy to answer anything that comes up right now. And if you have any sales questions, you can contact your respective sales member. If you don't know who your sales team member is, you can always contact us at team@infrascale.com. If you have any more technical questions, you can email that. You can also email support@infrascale.com. We can even set up a live demo for you, because it's one thing to have me talk about this at high speeds. It's another for us to sit down, talk about what it looks like in your site, and more importantly, see it work in your site, right? So we encourage that. So again, I'm going to open up for questions, and I talk a lot, so I'm just going to mute myself for just a moment while I wait for a few more questions. If you have no questions, you're welcome to hop off now. So thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to answering any questions that you might have.